Hey guys, welcome back to Naan Central. Today we're going to be making some garlic chili noodles from scratch. Very simple but very delicious. For one portion, we're going to start by weighing out 120 grams or 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Next, we're going to add half that weight in water, which is 60 grams or about a quarter cup. The last ingredient in our simple dough is a few large pinches of salt, maybe a quarter teaspoon. Next, we're going to add the water to the flour and begin mixing until the dough starts to come together. Once the dough reaches this consistency, we can switch to our hands to try and get the dough into a more cohesive mass. As you can see, the dough is actually quite dry, but eventually it will come together, so try and mix it first as much as you can before adding any additional water a teaspoon at a time. The dough should take about 2.5 minutes of kneading to reach this stage, after which you can just cover it with a plate and let it rest for about 20 minutes to autolyse. After 20 minutes, your dough should look something like this, at which point we can use a rolling pin to get the dough into a roughly oval shape. At this point, it's probably a good idea to add some flour to help the dough avoid sticking to the rolling pin. Next, we're going to flour our disc of dough and pass it through our roller on the widest setting. This is probably a good time to mention that if you don't have a stand mixer attachment or a countertop pasta roller, you can technically make the dough by hand with a rolling pin, but I wouldn't recommend it, and at that point I would probably just recommend that you buy store-bought noodles. Once the dough has passed through, we're going to do our best to fold it into thirds lengthwise. At this point, it's a good idea to stretch the corners of the dough to get it into as rectangular of a shape as possible. Before we pass the dough through the machine, we need to roll it out just a bit. Now is a good time to remove any specks that might have embedded themselves inside the dough. I should have gotten a pot of water up to a boil before I started rolling out the dough, but I forgot, so I'm just going to cover it with a damp towel temporarily. Now that the water is boiling, we're going to pass the dough through the roller again and again until it reaches the 5 setting, which is about 1 millimeter. Before each pass, we want to flour the dough thoroughly so that it doesn't stick, which yes, I did forget to do before the first one. Once the dough has reached the desired thickness, we can cut it in half lengthwise just to make the noodles more manageable, and then slice the noodles out using a pizza cutter. As you can see, I'm cutting my noodles quite wide. You can do yours as thin or as wide as you want them, that's just personal preference. And also the noodles will come out a little bit inconsistent, but in my opinion that just adds to the homemade appeal and authenticity. Next, we're going to flour the dough and stack up the noodles while we work on cutting the rest of the noodles. Next, we're going to add 2 to 3 tablespoons of canola or grapeseed oil to a non-stick skillet over medium heat. Then to the pan, we're going to crush in 1 or 2 cloves of garlic depending on how garlicky you want it. And as you can tell, my garlic cloves were frozen, so it did take a bit of effort, but eventually they did get in the pan. Next, we're going to add in our chili flakes, which ideally would be gochugaru, but I didn't have any, so I'm using Aleppo. Then we're going to give the pan a vigorous swirl to get everything nice and mixed together. While that's going, we can start to boil our noodles, which should take about 3 minutes to cook. Once those are in, we're just going to give them a brief stir with some chopsticks to make sure nothing's sticking together. After about a minute, I decided to add some pasta water to the pan to stop the garlic from browning. Once the noodles are about halfway done cooking, we're going to add in the rest of the ingredients to the sauce, starting off with some oyster sauce, which is notoriously difficult to get out of the bottle, and also is apparently going to make the camera go out of focus. And after we save our pot of noodles from boiling over, we're going to add in about 1.5 teaspoons of dark soy sauce, and about 1/4 teaspoon or maybe 1/2 teaspoon of sesame oil depending on how much you like it. You can also toss in a large pinch of MSG if you're feeling frisky. Last and optionally, we're going to add in some sambal chili paste, which is going to improve the color and flavor, but you don't have to add it if you don't want to. Now that everything's in the pan, we can give it a final swirl just before the noodles are done cooking. Once the noodles are done cooking, we're going to remove them from the pot using a slotted spoon and straight into the hot pan, stirring vigorously to coat. Once the noodles are mixed together well, you can turn off the heat and serve immediately. Optionally, you can top with sliced green onions and or sesame seeds, but I forgot to do either one. So that's about it for these noodles. This recipe is really more of a basis, so if you want, you can customize the ingredient amounts and add or substitute whatever you want in here. So yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video.